Get ready for color 10.
New fire in an old debate. Should drugs be legalized to take the profit out of them? President Bush will visit Colombia. And Gorbachev's economic plans get a frigid reception. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. Another milestone in America's problems with drugs. The first public call by a U.S. federal judge for legalizing narcotics to take the profit out of them, putting the state in charge of drug distribution, and declaring the current strictly law enforcement approach pretty much a failure. Amid the wide and varying reaction to this proposal, word tonight that President Bush will make a fast trip to Colombia in February. He'll have a high-publicity meeting with leaders of the frontline cocaine-producing countries of Colombia, Bolivia, and Peru. Correspondent Mark Phillips begins our coverage of Rethinking Strategy Against the Drug Plague.
For the first time, a federal judge says that the way to stop drugs being sold illegally is to have the government sell them legally. To current Washington thinking, that's heresy.
It's stupid. It's morally atrocious. It will lead to a dramatic increase in crack, heroin, and other illegal drugs.
Legalize crack that makes instant addicts? What are we going to have, a nation of zombies?
This is a federal judge who has a lifetime job, is simply out of step with mainstream America.
But this federal judge, Robert Sweet of New York District Court, has had 11 and a half years' experience on the bench, and he thinks the current battle plan is losing the war on drugs. The plan is simple enough: find the drug dealers and users, arrest them, bring them to trial, and throw them in jail. The problem is most of the dealers go unfound, the arrests eat up police resources, the trials are clogging up the courts, and while the prisons are overflowing with drug criminals, the drug problem persists. Now Judge Sweet has joined a radical chorus calling for the criminal drug problem to be decriminalized. There is no evidence, he says, that prohibition has or will break this vicious cycle of dependence. The idea may have little support in Washington, but it does have support elsewhere.
Those of us who have been talking about decriminalization have simply said, let's make this a public health war on drugs rather than a criminal justice war, and come up with new and effective strategies.
I'm not saying this is going to end problems. We will have certainly problems, but we will be able to cope with them more directly and without the distraction of thousands of people going to jail.
Won't they stop if it's legal? Won't it be better if you can just go and get it?
No.
But for those trying to nip drug use in the bud, legalization would send out exactly the wrong message.
By legalizing it, we're just setting up for our society to be a failure even more so in the future, because the children are going to be the victims.
In fact, there was growing evidence today that attitudes towards drug use are hardening among the young and the old. A nationwide survey of workers released today by an employer's anti-drug group found that workers in general favor drug testing by a margin of 68% to 19%. In work groups where drug use was felt to contribute to safety problems, the spread was greater. Among construction workers, 81% for testing, 16% against. Among pilots, 94% for, 6% against.
We feel that employers have the key. Employers have the most effective weapon in the war on drugs, and that's the paycheck.
The comments by Judge Sweet have again stirred the pot in the debate how to best fight the war on drugs by using the carrot or the stick. In government and in business, the stick is winning, even if the war itself is a long way from being won. Mark Phillips, CBS News, Washington.
CBS News Chief White House Correspondent Leslie Stahl is at the White House now with more about President Bush's decision for a quick trip to Cartagena, Colombia, February 15th. Leslie, why is the president making this trip, and why announce it now?
Well, the president says that he wants to show support for President Barco of Colombia, and he doesn't want to send a signal that Colombia is too dangerous a place to visit. So what the president basically did, because this is such a dangerous place in the world, is he told his security people to find a way to make this work despite the violence that's going on down there. Remember, Dan, that in the last 3 months, the drug lords have set off more than 260 bombs. Most of that since President Barco has reinstituted extradition of these drug lords to the U.S. for prosecution. There's one final possible consideration of the president's decision, and that is that recent polls show that public approval of his handling of the drug issue has plummeted as much as 20 points. So he may be wanting to show a renewed commitment.
Well, Leslie, we talk about the danger in Colombia, which is real and present for a president. How great is that danger?
Well, you know, in many ways, the president is walking into the belly of the beast. This is one of the most dangerous, most violent places, certainly in this hemisphere. Cartagena is a staging area for a lot of the smuggling operations of the drug cartel, boats and planes going off from Colombia with drugs to the United States. That is why the president will stay only one day. He will not sleep over. I'm told that Cartagena is a peninsula with a naval station on it. He'll be basically confined. The meeting will take place there under extraordinary guard and protection, though the White House is not telling us how many extra security people he'll be taking with him or how much it'll cost.
Thanks, Leslie.
Dan.
The government of El Salvador today freed an American church worker suspected of hiding weapons for rebels. She was then expelled from the country. Correspondent Juan Vasquez in Miami has the story.
Immediately after she was released from jail this afternoon, Jennifer Casolo was deported, taken to the international airport to board a flight to the United States, bringing sighs of relief from her family in Connecticut and her supporters.
She's deeply concerned about proving her innocence but we feel that she can continue to try to prove that in America.
I personally welcome this announcement for the signal it sends about the legal system, hopefully in El Salvador, a system that has not distinguished itself for fairness or even humaneness.
The bizarre case began when a self-described former guerrilla gun runner led police to Casolo's home in San Salvador. The National Police videotaped the discovery of a huge stash of weapons and ammunition as a distraught Casolo proclaimed her innocence.
I'm not responsible for this stuff. I didn't do it, and you're going to put it out on the news, and my mother's going to see, and she's going to get all upset.
The arrest came amid a crackdown on religious workers in El Salvador, but both the U.S. Embassy and the White House said the case against Casolo seemed strong.
This is hardly a case of someone having a few things slipped in their shopping bag on the way home.
Today, President Alfredo Cristiani said that even though she has been released, he remains certain she is guilty.
Morally, we are convinced that she is guilty and that she knowingly was holding the explosives, the propaganda, and the ammunition found hidden in her garden.
But Casolo continued to maintain her innocence, and today the judge ruled there was not enough evidence to hold her. There was no word on the fate of the 6 Salvadorans arrested on the same charges. Juan Vasquez, CBS News, Miami.
Still to come on your CBS Evening News, David Dow on drug abuse and adoption. A new way for couples who want to adopt to find out if a baby has been damaged by cocaine. The Soviet parliament sat on its hands today as Mikhail Gorbachev's prime minister unveiled another new economic plan, but one calling for no fundamental change in the Marxist-Leninist economic system. The presentation took nearly 2 hours, but the speaker was interrupted once by applause. Correspondent Bill McLaughlin reports from Moscow.
The new economic agenda Prime Minister Nikolai Ryzhkov outlined to Parliament today was a big disappointment for the hundreds of deputies hoping for bold and radical reform. He said the government had slammed the door on proposals for private ownership, on selling off inefficient state-run enterprises, and on monetary reform. Many delegates were openly critical. Lenin said that a party that can't admit its own mistakes doesn't have a moral right to lead, this delegate said. The party hasn't recognized its own mistakes. Outspoken reformer Boris Yeltsin said there are not enough fundamental changes, not enough new positions. But in the background, Gorbachev is lobbying hard for his plan, telling deputies it's the country's only hope. The system may be running out of time. Today, Pravda warned that bread, the country's staple food, was in short supply, and that most of the country's bread industry is in a disastrous condition. Complaints are mounting about the painfully short supply of consumer goods. More critically, the Soviet Union is facing a brutal winter and may not have enough fuel to heat homes, schools, and hospitals adequately.
Observers here say it's ironic that having sparked the changes now sweeping Eastern Europe, Gorbachev is resisting fundamental change at home. Bill McLaughlin, CBS News, Moscow.
Communist leaders in Bulgaria are running faster in a desperate effort to stay ahead of the reform movement there. Today, the Communist Party chief told his followers to get ready for a nationwide exam to compete for the hearts and minds of people in free elections. Correspondent Martha Teisner is in Bulgaria.
Bulgaria's reconstituted Communist Party used all the apparatus of old communism tonight to make it absolutely clear it is still in charge and intends to stay that way. The same square that dissidents had filled with candlelight was a red field of Soviet flags tonight. A vast sea of the party faithful turned out in even bigger numbers than the dissidents could generate to chant and cheer Petr Mladenov, Bulgaria's new communist leader. He told them that even without its dominant role written into the Constitution, the Communist Party can compete and win free elections. They chanted BCP, Bulgarian Communist Party, just as they did for 35 years during the stranglehold rule of the old party boss, Todor Zhivkov. But today, at the end of their emergency plenum, Central Committee members threw Zhivkov and his son out of the party. Putting them on trial is not out of the question after revelations they stole millions. A Politburo member told reporters tonight he wouldn't want to be in Zhivkov's shoes now. Tonight, people in the crowd had tears in their eyes as their new leader told them that Bulgaria's Communist Party is now purged, but still strong. Martha Teichner, CBS News, Sofia.
South African President F.W. de Klerk met today with jailed black opposition leader Nelson Mandela. That's the first time since de Klerk took office that he's met with Mandela. The white minority government said the two discussed how to overcome obstacles to dialogue and said further talks are envisioned in the new year. More criticism, more charges of cover-up today about the U.S. Navy's official finding that one gunner's mate, Clayton Hartwig, probably alone, caused last April's explosion aboard the USS Iowa. Our Defense Department correspondent David Martin reports.
This whole thing is ridiculous. It's a big cover-up, in my opinion.
Two survivors of the blast which killed 47 sailors aboard the battleship Iowa told Congress their side of the story today, and neither of them believes the Navy's conclusion that Clayton Hartwig probably set off the explosion on purpose to commit suicide.
It's hard to accept that someone that you had worked with and someone that you had known try to blow up a ship, and not only the ship, but his fellow crew members and possibly myself and other personnel.
John Malahy and Kendall Truitt were handling powder in the bottom level of the gun turret when the explosion occurred. Both knew Hartwig well. Hartwig had named Truitt as the beneficiary of a $100,000 life insurance policy.
He kind of hit me in the shoulder laughingly and said, you know, if I ever die, you're going to be a rich man. He was 24, I was 20. We're never going to die. I mean, we're young, we're going to live forever. I didn't think much of it.
Truitt acknowledged Hartwig had once talked of suicide, but dismissed it as unimportant.
He said, well, all right, fine, well, just maybe tomorrow when I'm not here, you know, well, you'll see that I was serious. Clay used to do that. He used to say a lot of things to get people's attention.
Malahy talked to Hartwig the night before the explosion about a job Hartwig hoped to get in London. He did not sound like a man about to end his life.
And he was making a list of things to buy. He was really looking forward to it because this was the last time he was going to be out at sea.
The Navy still insists the blast was deliberately set, but admits its case against Hartwig is only circumstantial. Truitt, meanwhile, has collected the $100,000 from the life insurance policy, which he could not have done had the Navy been able to prove Hartwig committed suicide. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
Researchers today said 1 pint of blood from someone infected with AIDS contains enough virus to cause almost 2 million AIDS infections. The study in the New England Journal of Medicine said the finding helps explain why people who accidentally receive AIDS-tainted transfusions almost always catch the virus. The research found the blood of people with AIDS contains hundreds of times more virus than experts previously thought. Meanwhile, a biotechnology company said the AIDS virus apparently has a limited number of variations. If that finding holds up, it boosts chances an effective vaccine can be developed for AIDS. America's staggering debt. The government today reported that the deficit in the broadest measure of U.S. trade shrank in the year's third quarter. A drop in the value of the dollar helped push the debt down to $22.7 billion. That 29% decrease from the second quarter put the imbalance in trade at its lowest level in more than 5 years. But business correspondent Ray Brady reports that European officials hope to cut back one of this country's most successful long-run exports.
Trois superbes créatures sur une
Hey, it's the Fonz, talking French.
Et tout à coup, d'énormes roches se dressent devant nous.
Magnum PI, now Polare Italiano.
Ma nessun detective privato che si rispetti può garantire.
Around the world, American-made movies and TV rank #1. So much so that in Europe, some governments want to stop what they call an onslaught of Americana.
Incroyable Hulk.
We have our own culture, and we would like to have more production and to see more of streets of Florence or London than Miami.
So the European community is ready to fight even the Incredible Hulk. Right now, it produces only around 20% of its own programming. Much of the rest is American. But a new ruling calls on Europe's networks to increase their homegrown programming to more than 50% by 1991.
We don't like the principle because it opens the door. Once you say 50%, then 3 years from now, the European Parliament could say 60%. Then they could say 70%.
There's an intent to limit the amount of American programming that can come into Europe, and I think that's bad. It's a form of censorship.
For Americans, the battle of the airwaves involves not only the principle of censorship, but of megabucks as well. Movies and television rank second only to aircraft as this country's top export, bringing in this year alone nearly $3 billion. Any American television show seen in Europe can sell for as much as $75,000 to $100,000 an episode. What's more, TV in Europe is being deregulated, creating an explosion of new channels, a huge market for the United States to lose.
Foreigners have done it to us in autos, in computers, in videos, in fashion, and eventually they're going to do it in movies.
And television?
And television programming.
The French are leading the anti-American campaign.
That's too much blood, I say. Too many people killed, yes. I mean, the answer to any problem is always a gun.
And do-it-yourself programming has another advantage for the Europeans.
Creating more programs should normally provide more jobs.
Elles sont chaudes.
Still, what European producers are now putting on the air often sends viewers spinning the dial, looking for programs made in America.
I watch Dynasty.
Well, almost everybody watches.
To be honest with you, I think it's all rubbish.
American producers are betting their programs can't be kept out, that no government can tell 320 million European viewers, you can't love Lucy.
Por favor, Encanto, tienes estacionada la partida.
Ya lo sé, pero es que no me decido entre tirarme.
Ray Brady, CBS News, New York.
Prospects for a better-than-expected holiday shopping season lit up today like Christmas tree lights. The Commerce Department said retail sales jumped 0.8% in November. That's the biggest gain in 4 months, and one analyst said fears of a poor Christmas shopping season should abate with this report. Another tough choice for Americans heading into the 1990s. To the existing tangle of complicated law and emotion over adopting a baby, now the added uncertainty over drug abuse. Cocaine babies, perhaps born damaged for life because the biological mother used cocaine during pregnancy. Correspondent David Dow reports there is no easy answer.
No murmurs?
No murmurs. Heart's fine.
Doctors Judith Brill and Marvin Ahmet share almost everything: their professions, their marriage, their desire for children.
We're both pediatricians, and I don't think either of us can really imagine a life without children.
We see the joy of having a family, and that's basically why we want to experience that.
But after 8 years of marriage, of fertility drugs and in vitro fertilization, they are childless. Recently, they turned to adoption and collided with the drug age. Brill and Ahmet used an attorney to help negotiate an adoption with a young pregnant woman.
I thought about a baby being in our house in 2 or 3 months, and I was elated. I was also still very concerned, though, about drugs.
That concern led them to seek more information. Just days before the baby's birth, Brill and Ament received crushing news from this laboratory. Tests showed the baby's mother had used cocaine during her pregnancy. They might well be adopting a cocaine baby, facing serious health problems.
They're going to have a learning handicap. They're going to have short attention spans or be impulsive, they're concrete, poor social interactions.
Adoption experts fear what doctors Brill and Ament encountered is not unique. An estimated 400,000 babies will be born to prenatal drug users this year, 50,000 babies to cocaine users alone. These women are often unable and unwilling to care for an infant, making their children prime candidates for adoption. Not all show immediate signs of their mother's drug abuse. Even pre-adoption screening may not pick up potential problems. In the case of doctors Ament and Brill, the birth mother denied use of drugs during her pregnancy and even passed a urine test. But the adoptive parents were suspicious and through medical contacts learned of this unique drug analysis lab that tests strands of hair. The lab's method isn't fully accepted yet, and the birth mother, who declined to be interviewed, insists the lab is wrong. Right or wrong, there currently is no mandatory testing for drug use by birth mothers, by agencies or attorneys.
I cannot guarantee adoptive parents that any more than I could guarantee a birth mother that adoptive parents don't do drugs. It just isn't part of the legal system. It isn't a requirement.
Meanwhile, the baby that was to have been Ament and Brill's was born and immediately adopted by another couple who did not know the results of the hair analysis, leaving the two doctors as almost parents.
It means that all of your hopes have been dashed and that you're going to have to pick yourself up and start over again and somehow call on some inner resources to go through this perhaps again and maybe again.
And again with no guarantees. David Dow, CBS News, Los Angeles.
And that's part of our world tonight. Dan Rather for the CBS Evening News. See you tomorrow. Good night.